Welcome to the History Hotline, a direct line to a better understanding of all things Black history and beyond. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the History Hotline. My name is Deanna Lynn Cook and as always I will be your host today. Now from the title you'll know I'll be joined by a special guest, Paul Henriques, later on in the episode. But first, a story all about Pardna.
Pardna System by Elsie Henderson. Pardna, partner, susu, whatever. Me like it. The Pardna or susu or money go round was brought to the Caribbean from West Africa by the slaves them in the 17th century. It is an independent way of saving. The slaves used this way of saving to help ends meet and for a rainy day. The system still exists up to this day, but different islands have different names for the same concept. Now, me hear say the Caribbean people them a take it stateside and beyond. The partner thing consists of a banker who collect the money from the members them weekly or monthly, and it could last a few weeks, 6 months, or even up for a whole year, depending on how many people are join up. This merry-go-round thing was brought to the motherland in the 50s, so the Caribbean people them club together as a community and carry on with the tradition. Back then, them priority was to buy them own home, as they struggle to find adequate accommodation due to the fact they were told every single time, no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. So them throw them little partner and save hard to get the deposit to buy their first home, as traditional lending was not available. They continue to work hard, doing many jobs to help throw the little partner, and eventually buy them house outright. Throwing the partner help immigrants in so many ways. It also help them buy furniture, send money and borrow back a yard, holidays, save up for wedding, and a whole heap of things them.
So a little bit more on Pardna, the money saving system, what it is, what it's used for, and where it came from. That story was taken from Elsie Henderson, who wrote that story, and it's collated within a kind of collection of stories called Pardna Money Stories and Poems. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our special guest on to the podcast today. We have the wonderful Paul Henriques. Paul was born to Jamaican parents in London. He's a UI UX expert with over 20 years in the tech field and a lead UX designer on projects for clients such as Nestle, Unilever and Estee Lauder. In the past, he's launched an e-commerce platform for eco-friendly products and later launched an independent clothing label, as well as being a finalist in 2024 at the Black Tech Awards FinTech Person of the Year. But he's not really going to talk about any of those things in particular today, or maybe actually the fact that he is of Jamaican descent. But we're here to talk all about Pardna and the Pardna app. So here is Paul and my interview with him. So I'd like to welcome Paul Henriques on the podcast today. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, Diana. Thank you for the invite. Glad to be here.
So, Paul, you are born and raised in London to Jamaican parents. And you're here today primarily because I found you via social media because you started an app called Pardna. Do you want to start off by telling us what is Pardna?
Sure. So Pardna, essentially it is a communal money saving and management system. I know it's Pardna, you know it's Pardna, primarily because of our Jamaican backgrounds. But this method of saving has got multiple names, right? The academic name for it is rotating savings and credit, but that's a kind of like official name for it. But it's got many names all over the world. In some places, it's called, like South America, we call it Tanda. In some places of Africa, it's called Hagbad. It's called Ajo. It's called Susu. It's got many names all over the world. So yeah, and what exactly is it? Right. So how it works is a group of people come together and they decide to save a fixed amount each month for a fixed period of time. Right, there's one person who will be managing this group, and so all the individuals who have come together in this group, they would deposit their fixed amount with this person. We know that person as the banker, and they would deposit their funds with this person, and then the banker, the organizer, would give the pooled amount to one person in the group. Next month, everyone will come together again and deposit their fixed amount with the banker, and he would give it to the second person in line. Now, this process would continue until everyone has had a chance to receive the proceeds of the pot, basically. So essentially, for the first person who received, it's like he's getting a loan from the group, right? Because they've had their payout first. For the last person to receive, they are being helped to achieve a savings goal. So, people join these groups for different reasons. Maybe someone has an immediate bill they need to sort out first, so they get their payout first. Or maybe someone's saving up for a holiday or for something that they know is coming in the future, and then they'll get their payout last. But it's, that's how it works basically, and that's what we know as a Pardna.
Absolutely. You know what? It's interesting because I always, as you said, knew it and understood it to be a thing, but I always wondered why would anybody go first and take the money first? But actually, you're right. It's a loan, or the earlier people,
Yeah,
they're getting a loan for something they need like urgently or sooner.
yeah, absolutely. I've been in groups in the past where someone is literally has got a bill they need to pay, right? And so
Yeah.
they would get their payout first. Um, and like I said, different people have different reasons why they would join a group or they'll join a partner group. And that's it really.
And I think my grandparents, they had a partner to buy their first home
Oh yeah,
when they came from Jamaica. I think my granddad might have been the banker. He was
yeah,
big on organising a group in the front room with some some food and some
yeah,
dominoes.
yeah.
But why did they have to use that? I mean, the stories are because of
Yeah, so when Caribbean people came to the UK in the late 40s and early 50s and beyond, um, we was actually locked out of access to mainstream finance. Yeah, we couldn't get the loans to buy things, and even when we did, we wouldn't get the same rate as our neighbour. Basically, they would be on a good rate, and if we could get a loan, we would be on a ridiculous rate, right? So we just turned to the system, that we used back home, which was Pardna. Organize it amongst ourselves. Um, I guess we also had like a distrust of the system back then because of how we was treated,
yeah.
and you just turn to your community, people that you know and trust, basically.
Absolutely. And I can imagine, I don't know that it's that generation as well, the way that they kind of see money, and even now having like, people talk about having money under their mattress. There's I think a safety and a security knowing that the physical cash is viewable and they can feel it and it's tangible to them.
Yeah, again, you're right. It was that tangibility, and again, I would say again, it was that kind of trust element in it. Yeah, um, you know, imagine, we've all come over to this country, and you don't, the only people that you truly know is the people, in your community from back home. Yeah,
Yeah.
or the people who look like you, talk like you, going through the same things as you do, or you have been going through, with regards to housing, with regards to banking, with regards to employment. And so, we turn to each other because, there's that comfort there. And so, when it came to, needing to access finance, we obviously turn to us, and the systems that we use back home.
I've noticed that whilst my grandparents used it in that generation,
Hmm.
and my kind of parents' generation in their like 60s, still a few partners in Birmingham kicking around that are going strong in like the physical form.
Hmm.
I've noticed it's not something that like my generation or the ones in between kind of picked up and continued, and I wonder if this is kind of where your app comes in.
Absolutely. Um, See, that's the thing. What we're trying to do with the Partner app is not only to obviously help people who need that financial boost, who need that financial help, um,
Yeah,
but also continue the legacy. Yeah. Imagine back in the day, yeah, when we first arrived in this country, we couldn't get access to finance, and it took us a while to actually get a partner going. Um, we missed out on so much. It's the very early days, and I'm talking about things like getting on the housing ladder, right?
yeah,
And that has had knock-on effects to this day. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, that race-based wealth inequality from back then has affected how we are now,
mm,
right? So what I'm trying to do with Pardna app is to kind of instill that sense of I won't say urgency, but for me, it is a sense of urgency because I want young
yeah,
people to realize that there is a system that they can turn to and a method that they can use that is within their community. Um, you know, you have the things like the Klarnas that are really targeting young people today. And
yeah,
I'm not really a fan of that buy now, pay later system.
mm,
Um, and there's been evidence that that particular method of payment has had a detrimental effect on young people as well in terms of their kind
yeah,
of financial well-being and financial health. Um, so yeah, with the Pardon app, we're just trying to introduce it to young people. That being said, I do know I've come across lots of people, I'd say maybe in their late 30s onwards who still do Pardner. And
yeah,
obviously have been in groups or seen their parents in Pardner groups, um, and just continued the tradition. Yeah, because obviously in today's day and age, we have access to credit and etc. etc.
mm,
But we still do Pardner, which I always find quite interesting, and we're just here to continue that tradition. I'm going to say though, I do want Pardner to be um, established as a real mainstream method of financial money management. That's
yeah.
our kind of ultimate goal. But we're looking at our community first, and just trying to establish ourselves here.
Absolutely. And you have to, start with, I guess, the people it's kind of familiar to. Like, we've seen it for generations working, and understanding it for it to then.
Absolutely. I've you even our company name Pardna, you mention that to some people and they immediately get it. Yeah,
Yeah,
immediately know what we're about and what we're trying to do. And even when I've spoken to our brothers and sisters from Ghana, Nigeria, whatever, once you start describing what it is, and they get it because I said, oh, you mean
yeah,
Ajo, or you mean whatever the name of it is in West Africa or wherever,
yeah.
so yeah, exactly. We already get it, so it would make sense to concentrate on us first.
Yeah, definitely. I always find it interesting when there's similarities kind of across. Well, this is beyond the African diaspora. This is, a global
It is.
similarity in this financial system. It's like, the drink sorrel. Like everyone
Yeah.
drinks a form of sorrel. Like South Americans, they drink it in
Yeah.
Africa, in the Caribbean, and it's kind of, I guess, it's like the sorrel of the financial
I've
world.
never heard it described like that, but I might use that in some marketing.
You should
Yeah,
taglines.
exactly. Do you know what? When I first started this and I was doing some research into it, well, actually, when I was growing up, I just thought it was a Jamaican thing,
Mm,
right? But then, you came to find out that it's actually conducted worldwide, South America, Asia, obviously throughout Africa. I just find it quite interesting, that they've got these siloed pockets of communities who don't know about each other, but we're still doing this very similar saving system, but it's just got different names.
And we've carried it too. We've all carried it into the Western
It,
world. We've carried it to the US or to
exactly,
Britain or
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Fascinating.
definitely. Why did you kind of touched on it, but why did you decide to start Partner or make it into an app form as opposed to I don't know, another form of
You know what?
financial
There's a few
place?
reasons. As you mentioned, I'm into tech. I've got a history of working in tech for over 20 odd years. Um, so there's that connection there. I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always tried to build things. Years ago I had a e-commerce. I built an e-commerce website and that we were selling
Nice.
eco-friendly products, that kind of stuff. I had a t-shirt brand. I think everyone did back in the day, but I did as well. But the fun part for me was not only designing the t-shirts, was building the website that sold the t-shirts. So that's what I was interested
Nice.
in. Um, so when but I've always, for years, many many years, I've wanted to do something with Pardna, right? Like digitize it or modernize it in some way, right?
Yeah.
Back then, I didn't know how to do it. I know I wanted it, but the technology wasn't really there. Um, in the last few years, we've obviously had the cost of living crisis, um, which has meant that people needed a financial method that could help them through certain situations, right? And I just thought Pardna was perfect for that. And there was also the fact that the banking deregulation meant that companies like Pardna could use technology to access data, yeah, and build products on top of the data that the banks, usually held
Yeah.
quite closely. They didn't want to release that data. Now we can get access to it and build on top of it. So all these kind of things happened all at kind of once in the last few years. So I thought, right now is the
Yeah.
time. So we slowly built it. Me and my co-founder D Otis, and yeah, we've just slowly built up from then.
Brilliant. And in terms of kind of doing that work and getting it together, and I don't understand any of the tech or any of them things you said about banking
Okay,
regulation.
right, yeah,
I
yeah.
can just do the history. But what were the kind of challenges in creating maybe an app like that? Or I don't know if you had to convince people that this would be something that people would take up and use and
So the multiple challenges, right? Where shall I start? Any startup is going to be really, really hard in the early days, right? And that
yeah,
is, and that's no different for us and what we're doing. On top of that, we're self-funding it for now, right? So called bootstrapping. When you self-fund your project, you're bootstrapping it. So, which has meant that our resources are like very limited, but
yeah,
it's taught us to be very lean and to be very purposeful in what we do, right?
yeah,
Um, but also it meant also our progress is slightly slower than I would have personally liked. But we're patient. Having lack of resources is a challenge. um, Building a financial app is a challenge because you've got lots of regulations that you've got to be wary of and you've got to adhere to. I've had multiple conversations with the FCA, etc., who didn't understand the business model, and I had to kind of really explain it and, send them diagrams of the flow and what it means and all that stuff, So all that was very difficult. So getting over those hurdles was a very big challenge, and it's still a challenge today, but we're muddling
yeah.
through.
Absolutely. Sounds like it. it will take off in a sense of there is just so much behind it, and it's kind of, it just makes sense.
Yeah,
Does
yeah.
that make sense?
And I think you mentioned something, how did we know it's going to work, or how do we convince people? Well, the only thing that we needed testing was if, because people already do this method of saving already, right? So
Yeah,
the only thing that we needed to really test is if they would use an app for their saving, right?
yeah,
The older generation, when I say older, I mean the older, like in the 60s or whatever, or 70 years old or whatever, who may still do Pardna, they may not
yeah,
be the market to use an app for this, right? The younger generation who do use apps are very familiar with apps and may already use some form of financial app. They're not familiar with Pardna. So there's
yeah,
that kind of challenge, So we're just,
yeah.
reaching out and do that kind of education piece. But
Kind of trying to, the Venn diagram of the
yes,
people that are trying to get both.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's exactly it. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. And you mentioned, sorry, about kind of Klarna and these, like,
Hmm.
not just Klarna, but these kind of buy now pay later
Hmm.
setups, and the kind of way that Pardna might be potentially teaching, or the value of financial literacy and things like that. And I wondered
Hmm.
if you want to speak more about that. It's something that it really bothers me, because the way that they market some of them are so bright and colourful, and it's actually quite
It
serious.
is, it is, and it's
Borrowing
insidious.
money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, no, you're right. And basically with Pardner, we're teaching. Well, there's the value of your community, yeah, and when you achieve, everyone in your group achieves. That what's that
Yeah.
when the rising tides floats all boats or something like that. But it also teaches to be patient, yeah, and to save up for the things that you need, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you know, in certain aspects in partner, if you're obviously the first to receive your partner draw, then you can use that money for the things that you want and need, right? Um, but you're still committed to that group, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and with something like Klarna, or with something like a credit card,
Yeah.
you can go down a rabbit hole. And I know there was, like, a few years back, there was a crackdown on, like, payday lenders. You remember? I don't remember
Yeah.
back in the day they were like running rampant, right?
Yeah. There was loads. They're
Yeah, yeah,
everywhere.
yeah. But the government cracked down on them, but they still exist. Yeah,
Okay.
and the payday lenders still exist, and the promise of getting that quick cash right now, but you're
Yeah.
paying these sky high fees. It's crazy. Um, but then a lot of people get caught in that kind of cycle of payday lenders, and then
Yeah.
you're trapped because you're paying these such sky high fees. You end up probably worse off than you was before. With building a partner, yes, you pay a fee, but it's like a fraction of what you would, if you're using like a pay or credit card, or pay their lender, for example. So, we're just trying to teach the value of being smart with your money, basically, and
Yeah.
the value of patience, the
Yeah.
value of community and trust, basically. Yeah.
And not think the, I don't know what the opposite of instant gratification is, but yeah, patience.
Yeah, yeah,
In the
that's it.
sense
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you don't have to have everything now.
Yeah, yeah,
It's going to
exactly.
wait.
There are some things that you can actually save up for and then get it, in a few months' time. Not, you don't need it right now. You can get it in a few months. And
Yeah,
that's what we're trying to
definitely.
teach the value of that.
Brilliant. Have you seen or kind of been able to think about who has kind of signed up and who is using the app, or kind of is it the demographic you thought it might be? Is it the kinds of people you assumed it would be?
Um, yes. So, like we haven't really done any kind of marketing at all, because we're
Yeah.
still kind of building mode, and we're still testing things out. But all the signups we get, just based on the names alone, I can kind of tell that it's it's about community, or the West African people kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just assume that maybe they maybe follow me on Twitter or follow the Pardna app, or someone's retweeted something, you know,
Yeah.
and that's how I assume that they've come across the app. Like I say, we haven't done any kind of marketing yet. We will do, and then it'd be very interesting. And when we do our marketing, yes, initially we are gonna focus on the Caribbean and African communities first, and establish ourselves here, before we, move out to the wider community. But yeah, it is within
Yeah.
our community.
Brilliant. And it's interesting with, I guess, the term kind of community, because partner back in the day would have been people that are in your area or
Yeah,
close to you, because you have to get there to bring the money in
it,
quite
it,
regularly.
exactly. Being people in your local vicinity, of your community, your church,
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, so absolutely.
And this completely widens out community in that sense, because you don't need to be
It
close.
absolutely does. It just means that your relatives in Birmingham or your relatives in London can join you now. You know,
Yep.
there's communities that are obviously spread out. You know,
Mm.
so we don't have to. It doesn't have to be the person who lives around the corner, because you have to deliver them the cash and that kind of stuff. So it's a lot easier.
Do you know, by any chance, you might not know, it's okay if you don't, like, where did the money system come from? Like, do we know all the way back, or
Do you know
who
what
started it?
um, we say it started off in Africa. I'm gonna say even 1,000 years ago. But
Oh,
even
wow.
I know around that time, there's records of similar systems being used in Japan, right?
Mm.
Around that, like 1,000 years ago. So it has been going for literally generations. Hundreds of, maybe even 1,000 years. I'm not even joking. You know,
Yeah.
so we can't put it down to one African country or one African nation who started it off, but it would have
Mm.
been somewhere there. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess it stood the test of time then,
Oh,
because
yeah,
it
no, but
wasn't.
yeah, exactly. This it obviously works, right?
Mm.
And when we was taken to the Caribbean, we took the system with us.
Yep.
And
Mm.
even in like South America, and I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know who in, for example, Bolivia or Mexico,
Right.
how did they start it off? Where did they hear about it first? We don't know, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And how it survived something like the period of enslavement, where I'm not assuming there was much money to be saved. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
these periods, and to travel again to South America potentially, or to
yeah.
Europe.
But what did endure was the community spirit. That's what endured, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, Pardna is built on top of um, being in a community, and being beholden to that community and having
Yeah.
trust in that community. That is a thing that has endured throughout all our, history of being in Africa and being in enslaved people in the Americas. Yeah, it has stood the test of time, basically.
So, and it's only right that if it's going to continue, it has to then move with these generations
Exactly,
that
yeah, and
are developing.
we're technology is moving on, and I want us to, be at the forefront of technology. Yeah, I don't want us to miss out. Um, and I want to bring Pardner into the digital age, into the future. Um, that's what we're doing. There was I don't know if it's still going. I think it's going on to the end of the year. There's an exhibition in the Bank of England Museum
Hmm.
of all about Pardner and its
Okay.
history in the UK. And we've got a little feature in there as well. Our app
Oh,
is featured in
nice.
there as a feature of Pardner. So we really believe that's true. We believe we are the future of this. And I'll say that knowing that there will always be people who prefer to do it manually, which is fine, which is great, you
Yeah.
know. Um, But young people today, we want to bring young people into this method of saving, and obviously they're glued to their phones. They're familiar with and comfortable using fintech apps. We want to be one of the apps that they use regularly.
I didn't know that Bank of England even had a museum.
Yeah.
But that it'll be interesting then to see that exhibition. So I will put details of that in the show notes. If you are listening and interested. I had absolutely no idea.
They've got a museum. A couple of years ago, they had a history of slavery in the UK and how it related to the monetary system in this country. And
because a lot of the banks were born out of that. And I've read articles about that from the Bank of England, but I didn't know it came from a museum department.
In their museum, they kind of really focused on how they obviously funded some of the these slave ships and these slavery exhibitions. Funny enough, I think, if I remember correctly, the Bank of England, they loaned some merchant the money to go on a slavery exhibition, and he went and got his slaves. He went and enslaved some African people. But I think what happened was he couldn't pay the loan back, and so what ended up happening, the bank ended up owning his property in very common. So at one point, the Bank of England owned slaves. So that's how deep it goes,
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely right there, sharing that history.
Yeah, they should be whipped for that. You know what I mean? The banks should be whipped for that. And during, when we came over to this country in, the late 40s and, during the Windrush generation, it was the banks who wouldn't lend us money to do certain things. And so it led to us, turning to Pardna. And this exhibition kind of details of that as well.
It's interesting that what the banks would lend and who they would
lend
it to. And then who they won't.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly, yeah.
For what they need to build lives here.
Tell me about it.
It's interesting. Yeah, really, really, really an interesting history. And I think, as you've said, Pardna will remedy a few issues. One, kind of upholding this history and culture, which I think is just so important.
Yeah.
But also, I think bringing a younger generation to a more community mindset. I think that also would be quite a beneficial thing for society now.
Absolutely.
It's apparent that we're a lot more individualistic, I think, as a global society than we've ever been, and I don't think it's for the better. Yeah,
and you know what? I think in the UK as well. That's why I'm really pleased with the fact that you're very keen on history, especially Black history in the UK, because not enough young people are, and a lot of what our pioneers in this country went through and the achievements and things we established, it's kind of getting lost to history, because young people maybe not curious about their history in the UK, or then obviously, I know they're not taught it in school, and so it's up to us to really make sure that our legacy in this country is not lost, or it's not whitewashed, or it's not, hidden under the carpet. So we've got to bring these things to the fore.
Definitely, it's a challenge. I think there are kind of like, you said about the, our grandparents' generation that came here and were barred because of race from, achieving certain points at buying a house and getting certain jobs and things like that that have held them back financially. I think in terms of our education, there's been so many things that we haven't been able to access. And it's difficult with our history in Britain to even know where to start. I think once you've got a starting point, whether that's, I don't know, a documentary, a book, a podcast to start with.
Absolutely.
You can kind of, start and then figure out what you need to know next and what interests you, because not all of Black British history is interesting to everyone. Some people want to learn about protest and some people want to learn about Pardna,
Yeah, no, that's true.
So I think it's a difficult one, but I think I'm having, studied history now for a while. I've seen it is changing positively. There was this 2020 moment that catapulted a lot of important messages in history, and fortunately I'm seeing a pullback. I'm feeling a pullback. I hope we can somehow keep up momentum, but I think it's not just on one set of people to tell these histories. If you're in the NHS, tell the histories of Black doctors and nurses. You being in tech and interested in finance, you get that history of Pardna. We can all have a hand in that. As you said, community-wise, we can all have a hand in telling these histories because they're spread across so many different disciplines.
That's true. That's a good point. Excellent.
So, well, here's to hoping that that continues.
Yeah.
Despite pushback and, we've got things like Notting Hill Carnival, hopefully we can hold on to things and really big cultural events that happen like
Absolutely,
that.
man.
So I think that is everything I had to ask you today, Paul. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. There's been so many gems in this episode, and I'm sure guests will agree that, whilst you're not necessarily a historian, you've definitely brought us a history of the culture, you've brought us the importance of community, finance and tech. I think, that's, top tier guest today.
Oh,
thank you so much for joining, joining us.
Do you know what? Like tech, history is for everyone. So that's why I'm here.
Absolutely, exactly. And I guess a podcast marries tech and history.
It does, absolutely.
Here we are. I wondered where people can find you, where they can, get involved with Pardna, find out more about it, social media, website, and the app.
We are in the app stores, in the App Store and Google Play. Just search for Pardna, and it's the purple logo with the P. You can check out our website, pardna.com. Pardna is spelled Pardna.com. We are on socials. Do you know what? I really need to be more active on socials. I'm really not like so check out Pardna on Twitter, as I still call it. I don't really call it X, which is /Pardna, Pardna.
Brilliant. I'll tag all of that in the show notes as well,
Cool.
if you do just want to find that. Also, just on Pardna and the spelling, why did you choose, not that I disagree, with the Pardna NA instead of ER?
Do you know what? A shorter URL is always the best. Brand-wise, it's better. And, sometimes it is spelled like that. So, but I just want to.
It is.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Brilliant. There was no right or wrong answer. I was just curious. Because even when I was writing it in my notes, I was like, going between the two spellings. The Pardna app, the spelling, why it exists, the history, and its current iteration in app form. That was all for my conversation with Paul Henriques. A big thank you, Paul, for joining me on the episode this week. So from me and Paul this week, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye. That's it for another episode of the History Hotline. If you enjoyed it, please rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you listen to, or tell a friend to tell a friend. To continue the conversation, follow us on social media at The History Hotline on Instagram and at The History HL on Twitter. The History Hotline is hosted by me, Deanna Lynn Cook. Research and marketing done by Zakia Riaz. Production by Waylon Mackenzie Witter. And original music provided by Royal Sounds. Sponsored by Musetopia. The History Hotline.